This is Bitsy Tulloch, and you are listening to Superman and Lois and Pals.
Greetings, super friends. Welcome to Superman and Lois and Pals. I'm Henry Bernstein, and alongside me is my favorite super pal, Professor Sam Brody. Happy Halloween, Sam.
Happy Halloween, Henry.
What is your favorite spooky Superman story?
What a good question.
Thank you.
I was a fan of that Neron crossover from the 90s.
Wasn't Superman dead during that? Underworld Unleashed?
Oh, was he?
He's like, that's like the
Bummer.
one crossover he's not in because he had just come back or something. Or
Okay. Well, I guess the Phantom Stranger and Spectre stories that
Mhm.
Superman is in are pretty good. Um, Actually, I hate to make everything be about the death and return, but that one where Pa Kent is like talking to the weird Kryptonian ghost is spooky as hell.
when Pa kind of goes to the other side, and
Hmm.
yeah, Adventures of Superman 500, that counts as a spooky one for sure.
It
That's
was
great.
really spooky.
My favorite spooky Superman story is the first Silver Banshee story,
Mm.
the introduction of Silver Banshee. I think she is a great spooky Superman villain.
Cool. Yeah, I like that one too.
Good, we can agree on that. All right. Well, speaking of spooky, we've got some spooky doomsday coming up. So let's talk about Superman and Lois season 4, episode 5, Break the Cycle. Directed by Elizabeth Henstridge, written by Adam Mallinger. The Apple TV and IMDb description is Lois makes increasingly bold moves as she tries to stop Luthor. Jonathan struggles to balance his personal life and responsibilities, while Clark learns an unsettling truth. Sam, what is the one thing, the takeaway, the issue that you have with this episode?
I think that Lex Luthor works better when you do not dwell on his backstory at all.
Is
There is
that
one,
because when you start to have sympathy for a heel, they become a babyface?
not necessarily. It's because there's something mythic about Lex Luthor that just gets lost when you give him some petty motivation. There's one exception, which I think is Smallville, because you start with him as a regular character, and therefore you kind of grow with him the whole time. And there's his motivations make a little more sense. In the typical Superman story, where it starts with Superman starting out in Metropolis and Lex Luthor's an adult. Even the like Byrne version where Luthor is jealous of how much press Superman gets or something. It's just so unbelievably petty.
That it's not believable.
Right. I mean it's not unbelievable, right? Donald Trump exists, but like I don't want Lex Luthor to be Donald Trump. I want him to be a great villain. Like I want not a
Oh.
skeevy villain.
Well, that's interesting you said that, Sam, because we know John Byrne based his Lex Luthor off of 1987 Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And my understanding is that it was always sort of praised by fans and critics alike. And I thought I seem to have a memory of you liking that. So can you
Yes, so
sort of explain the
here's the
sort of the
difference.
nuance to that?
Yes. 1987 Donald Trump is a better villain than 2024 Donald Trump.
Boom. Oh, nice. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
1987 Donald Trump represents the me decade. He
Right.
represents
Wealth, the
the
80s, capitalism.
exactly
Yeah.
like and he is nowhere near as like shallow and
Stupid.
right as the current version.
Hmm.
So like that's actually like a better version. And I even don't mind that like who did that autobiography of Luthor where the cover looks like the art
Yeah.
of the deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
The
that
the unauthorized biography.
right.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. That's a good story. I like it, even though it gives him a little backstory where he's abused by his father and so on.
Yeah, and I
But
think in this episode they like
mhm,
lifted that directly from the
mhm.
pages of that comic. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. And I did like that after they make him sympathetic, they give him the opportunity to choose his daughter and go away and stop being a villain, and he just like turns it down. That was the saving grace of that for me, even though it's not generally a choice I like. I was like, okay, that's fine. But for most of the time, I'm like, oh, stop trying to make me sympathize with him.
Right. Interesting. Well, I wanted to ask you about one particular point that it seemed I couldn't tell if it was supposed to make us be sympathetic or not. I mean, I think clearly showing his backstory of living in impoverished and
Hmm.
abused is we're supposed to start to feel something for him so that at the end when he hardens his heart again, we're like, ah. So at the beginning, I was thinking about now I have this thing in my head of your voice in my head saying that this is sort of like an alternate version of Luthor. This is like an Elseworlds or
Hmm.
and I really like that. And I've been paying close attention to the character and to see how he's different. And the thing that really struck me was where in the comics and other iterations, maybe Luthor has had a child or had some sort of estranged relationship.
Hmm.
It's always been like the child was the product of a one night stand or a short relationship. And
Hmm.
here, I don't think I've ever seen Lex Luthor in a room with papers getting a
Hmm.
divorce over a 13-year loveless marriage. That was quite an interesting take on him to imagine Lex Luthor like that all those years. It makes sense. I could totally see he's like a mob boss
Hmm.
trapping some woman in a marriage or whatever it is, and
Hmm.
with wealth and money and then a child. But I was wondering, did that make you feel sympathetic, which you didn't like established, or did not?
Yes, it did, because it makes sense that this version of the character would think that he ought to be married without having any aptitude for marriage or willingness to work on being married.
Right. When he says that we went to therapy once.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The typical Lex Luthor doesn't tolerate marriage, I think.
Hmm.
Typically, you never see him married. He's always single. And
Yeah. Right.
he always only has affairs.
Right.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I remember in the comics after Superman came back from the dead, around Superman Man of Tomorrow #0, sort of right after Luthor came back from dying of his clone body in Action 700, like disappearing, right? That neuron thing. He sells his soul to the devil to get
Hmm.
a young body again. Anyway, shortly after that, he marries, was it Talia al Ghul or something? Like he marries someone of great power and importance. And it seemed like a marriage of convenience. I think they were both, it was like
Hmm.
a power situation. So like that would make sense to me.
Hmm.
And that was short-lived. So it was interesting to see like a vulnerable person divorcing him. Yeah.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but in any of the other depictions where he has a child, does he ever care about them or like want to be in a relationship with them, or does he just ignore them?
I have this sort of anecdotal or sense memory of seeing Luther having a daughter of some kind who's like comes back from a long time in a position of power or something like that. Like I think maybe even in the comics recently, in the last year, I think they introduced an adult Luther daughter. Yeah. Who was like
Okay,
working at LexCorp.
I missed that.
Yeah. So, and they seem to be estranged. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's it's interesting here because he's sort of hell-bent on seeing her, but once she's ready to repair the relationship, he actually only wants revenge. He actually doesn't want to be with her.
Yeah, I mean that part I thought was a nice bit of characterization because it's sort of like he blames Lois for ruining his life and ruining this relationship, and he would rather live on that anger than actually have the thing back
Right.
that was taken. He would rather be a person that had something taken from him than be a person who has that thing.
In this case, Sam, though, where I think it actually does make sense is you could imagine someone who spent 18 years in prison, they're conditioned to, like Shawshank Redemption, you can never make it on the outside, you know? I mean, he's institutionalized, right? And so he's sort of institutionalized in his mind. He's been stewing for 18 years over revenge over Lois Lane for losing his wife. And so although it sort of was anchored in his losing his daughter, it really is the driving force behind him.
Again, that's one of the things that makes it like an Elseworlds character.
Yes. Yes.
Because this is a Lex Luthor who really has lost. Like typically, like going to jail for 18 years, like you lost.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah, you lost the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not a version that we usually see. And so
No.
that is pretty interesting. But is it my preferred flavor? No. But it's an interesting thing that they're doing, and I'm glad it exists as a version.
Now I'm remembering last year, I'm pretty, maybe it was even 6 months ago. I'm several months behind on the comics, but there's a storyline where I think this is Josh Williamson's Superman. Lex Luthor is in prison, but he is talking to Superman and helping him from prison. And Superman is now in charge of LexCorp, and it's called SuperCorp. And Lex's daughter is one of the people in charge.
Okay,
they don't have a good relationship.
I mean, he just talks to Superman by talking at normal volume, right?
Yes, that's what it is. Yes, he's just Superman's doing the like honed in on one frequency,
like
and it's
what he usually does for Lois.
Lois,
like,
yeah.
instead it's for Lex.
Yeah, which I thought was a cool wrinkle. So anyway, I'm remembering what that connection was to Luthor's daughter, and it was something like Lena Luthor or something. I thought the Lex stuff. Although I hear what you're saying about the sympathy thing, I think because at the end he's so villainous and dastardly, and you see his anger and pain, and he won't accept just Elizabeth. I think it's okay. I think it all that stuff of the backstory and feeling sympathy for him, I think it works. It was a good bait and switch. I thought it was really interesting. Elizabeth Henstridge, who played Elizabeth Luthor, also directed this episode. And I saw like a lot of stuff on social media. Sam, is she a big deal? Like, was she on like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something? Like,
she played Gemma on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Was that a big character?
Yeah, one of the main characters.
Oh, okay. So she's a beloved TV comic book. It's like when they have one of those Power Rangers direct the episodes, right? I forget which one. The
pink one.
Right, the pink one. I see. Okay, so it's sort of like one of those like, look, we got a awesome TV comic book gal to be in it. Okay.
And they got a Marvel person to be in a DC.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. I mean, I thought she did a nice job. I thought the episode was well directed, and the parts I really struggled with, Sam, you're not going to be surprised by this, is the stuff with the kids. When that girl with the pigtails is like,
Denise.
Your dad. Yeah, it's like, your dad. You know, your dad. No, you're Superman, your dad. I mean, I almost turned off the TV. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Like, we've got 5 episodes left. We're halfway home, and you're starting this now? Like, a storyline about the town now casually knowing that Superman is Clark Kent and everyone's cool. Like, please, I don't have time for that right now. It's already my biggest pet peeve in comic book shows when there's 15 people who know the secret, and now it's just like, oh, Smallville knows.
It's already weird that Lex Luthor's like, I'm going to go take revenge on Superman, so Smallville is obviously where I go. Like, that's already weird enough. Just leave it there.
Just leave it there. Okay, you've managed to get some fakakta way for Lex Luthor to be in Smallville. Okay, fine. But I can live with that, but I can't have like the other girl in their class being like just cool with like Clark Kent as Superman. Don't worry, I won't tell. Like,
and then Candace has to find out too, because that's the arc of that episode. And she finds out off screen.
Why is Candace back? Like, who cares? Why are we wasting time? Just give me Lana. I mean, a person of consequence. Give me an extra scene of Sarah, someone we've been with. Like, I don't care that Candace. I forgot that she existed. To quote Taylor Swift, I did not.
Somebody that I used to know.
Yeah, I heard that on the radio today, and I was like, oh wow, one-hit wonder. Safe to say that was a one-hit wonder. Yeah, I just, all the kids stuff was just it ain't it. I like that John was kind of dressed like Marty McFly,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, is this Sam? Do you think this is going to be a thing where, like, one by one, the people of Smallville, like, why do that scene with that girl who's like, I'm cool with it, and then the other person that knows and Candace knowing, unless you're going to do like a cascade thing?
It could be that they're building to the idea, like a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man thing, where like, when he's supported by the city, and the whole point is that it's not just Spider-Man, but it's Spider-Man and the people of New York. Like it could be
Okay,
that like Superman will have like yeah, if you're from Smallville, you know this secret, but like
like
nobody
Soup
else.
Smallville is super town, we protect our own kind of thing.
Hmm.
Okay, if that's where they're going and Lana's the one leading the charge, then her whole thing from I don't like that thing, but at least it's a different version that we've never seen before because it never made sense in those Jerry Siegel 1950s comics why Superboy was also from Smallville where Clark Kent was, and then they both happened to go to Metropolis. Like it was, everyone was just dumb then.
Well,
But if it was a
Superboy only exist so Siegel could finally make some money off
yes, I'm
Superman?
not mad at Jerry Siegel. And how dare I even
Right.
question the writing of Jerry Siegel? But what I'm saying is that, like, the whole, when they did that massively popular series of Superboy in the 1950s and 60s, that whole part of it, that, like, everyone, and then there was something where, Superboy was raised by the Kents. And then they even did that in John Burns' thing. In those early issues, Lois goes to the Kent farm and Ma and Pa are like, oh, yeah, we raised Superman. Do you remember that?
No,
Yeah, it's in the John Byrne thing too.
I don't remember that at all.
Good. It's not a good. All right, fine. So if we're leading to Smallville being super town where they just protect Clark, okay, fine.
Not necessarily, but maybe that's what they're doing.
Maybe. Maybe.
Otherwise, it is hard to defend or understand some of these choices, right?
These were not
Because
good.
it's not like we really need Jonathan's romance to be resolved, right? Like,
No. That's what I'm saying. Candace they shouldn't have even brought her back. Like, you did the thing where his girlfriend moves away.
mhm.
Okay, she moved away. That's fine.
Of course, I did like that it created an opportunity for someone to mention Wichita as like a reminder that we are in an existing state that is real and has other places in it.
Like the only other town in Kansas in Smallville was Metropolis.
Mhm.
Right. So the two main things, sort of storyline, the main storyline thing is Lois getting through to Bizarro,
It was
which
interesting. Like it finally mattered again that they
yeah,
did a different origin for Doomsday. Because like
exactly.
otherwise, it's like, why did they do this weird alternate origin for Doomsday?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so that was like, remember how I talked about long-term storytelling last week? That was really good long-term storytelling to bring it back and to show the clips, the flashbacks of Bizarro World. Remember how cool that episode was?
Hmm.
That I really like and I really appreciated because it's sort of rewarding us. I've said this before for paying attention. And what I like about this season was I may have joked about it a little bit in our first episode this season, but they jump right in assuming we know everything. They didn't need to do a previously on that goes back to the Bizarro stuff. It's just like they're presenting those flashbacks as if knowing that we already saw them and they're okay with that. They're not hitting us over the head with any kind of exposition. You know what I mean? At this stage in the game. And I think one thing that Lois has been missing so far in this season and last season, because last season her story was so internal, like inwards facing. It was about her body and mind and everything. It's been a while since we've seen her get through to something else as Lois Lane doing which is her superpower. So she was wrong about this big story that caused this ripple effect that basically ruined her life. That Clark died and now Luthor's after her family. But she was able to fix it by doing Lois Lane, by getting through, by
Hmm.
being brave and getting through, and not being brave by hanging from the Eiffel Tower, but by approaching a monster and breaking through his
Hmm.
exterior. That was, I thought, really interesting and kind of. I was like, oh, Lois is back now.
That's interesting. I don't really think of that as like one of her powers. I think of her
Okay.
power as intellectual and like
But you don't think the way she gets stories and can like get to a subject matter to a subject to tell the truth to her, like that's what I felt this was kind of like she, she can
mm,
break people down in service of the story. And so I think in this case she used it to help people and herself.
okay, interesting. I just did not think of that at all, but it's
Okay.
certainly, yeah. I feel like the intellectual aspect is just like thinking of doing that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, to me, I think of her as in her element when she's like driven and like solving some kind of complicated problem by putting pieces together, more than just like, I'm gonna have a heart to heart with this monster, which is
Hmm.
like, to me, a little bit more CWE.
Okay. Interesting. I definitely agree with you on, yeah, her superpower about putting things together. And to your point last week about, when DC tried to make her the best detective in the DCU next to Batman, and also like good at magic for at the end of that Lois Lane run. I understand what you're saying about the little CW ish, but we haven't really seen Lois Lane connect with someone like that in a while. And I think because her power is, like you said, so intellectual and putting pieces together and getting to the heart of a story, you have to make Lois Lane also relatable and human. It's why it has to be a core value. Otherwise, she's not a lovable character. My example being John Byrne, those first 10 issues of Superman, that the way her character was. And so here getting that humanity by also figuring out the final piece of the puzzle, I thought
Mm,
was just like such a great marriage of those two, I think, core elements of Lois Lane.
cool. Interesting. So for me,
Sorry, it took me a while to get to there, but that's
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So to me, the lovableness of Lois Lane is something that is restricted to her inner circle, which is certainly something that you could say about this scene in some sense, because like this is a
right,
version of her
of her
husband from
husband.
you
Yeah.
know. But like I always imagine Lois Lane as being someone that like probably does not have she's not like America's sweetheart, you know? Probably a lot of people think that she's like a bitch,
Right.
right? Like, and
Right.
like a lot of people think of her as like a sort of standoffish person. Paparazzi don't follow her around. Like, people don't want to see her at award shows. She's
She's kind of a pariah, a social pariah.
I don't know, just think of like a hardcore journalist like Seymour Hersh or something like that, like uh it's just it's a kind of an annoying personality.
Right. Right.
And so
Right.
like you don't like
Well,
that
we've
person
seen
does
that.
not
People are like, "Oh, Lois Lane's here."
so like that kind of person has fans who are like people who want to be her, right? Like people who are like her and want to be her, but not like they're not lovable in a wide sense. Um so that's like kind of my vision of her as a character.
Hmm.
Like I think she should be sort of off-putting to a lot of outsiders.
Well, and I think every good version of Lois Lane usually has that. This is, even though I think this is the best version of Lois Lane, Bitsy Telex, she doesn't really have that. We haven't seen much of that because she's been on the farm. And I mean, she's like
Hmm.
that when she's at the Gazette and going after a story, I guess, but
Hmm.
she just seems more determined, not like you said, like that little tiny bit of sliver of annoying.
I mean, maybe it's true more of a younger version of the character than
Mm,
like a version that's been a mom for like 16 years.
right, right, right.
Maybe that softens her. I would accept that as like a
Okay.
like reason for this version of the character to be like a little softer.
Yes. Yes, a little more emotional, and obviously she's been through a lot
Hmm.
this last year. By the way, one last thing, Sam, did you pick up on the Kryptonian tech so that Lara can see the fight that Superman had with Doomsday? It's Kryptonian VR. I told you they had video games on the Fortress.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
It was like an Oculus that Superman had.
It makes sense because Lara's just an AI, right?
Right.
So she should be able to do whatever the various.
She should be able to look into his mind and his memories.
Well, any piece of tech that exists in the fortress, she should be able to like see whatever it sees.
Right.
That made sense to me. But you know what I remembered? I remember something else that's a different topic. Is that okay?
Please, please. Yeah. I just wanted to say that one thing.
When Lex is talking to his daughter and he's like, I didn't kill Boss Moxie. And she's like, yeah, but you did other things. I thought that was a missed opportunity to like say what those things were. Like, I don't necessarily feel like they owe me fan service, but just like filling in a little bit of like what was he notorious for before, Like
Right. Like it could have even been like a throwaway line like they've done before, like they did earlier, like that weapon sale of Toastmasters or something. They could have said
yeah,
something like that. And he would have been
exactly.
like,
Or, that time you worked with Brainiac to blah blah blah. I don't know.
right.
Something like that.
That time that purple battle suit that had kryptonite in it
Right.
was LexCorp
Right. You
branding.
tried to contract that to the city and then you secretly kept control of all of the suits, right?
When when that half man, half kryptonite robot named Metallo said
any version of that, I feel like it would have been nice.
Yeah, totally. In the meantime, was there anything else from Superman and Lois season 4, episode 5 that you want to talk about? We're halfway done, Sam. This is it.
Not so much Superman in this one.
No.
We definitely confirmed that costume is dark as hell, and I don't like it.
He was in broad daylight at Lex's house.
Suit.
And you couldn't see it.
Make it be blue. Make the S have yellow on it. Like, come on.
Like he shouldn't. It was like 3:00 in the afternoon when Superman was at Lex's estate. Right? Wasn't his daughter getting home from school or something at that time? So why was it so dark? It's because it's just dark. And especially in those flashbacks, 18 years ago, shouldn't he be wearing something a little closer to his Fleischer first appearance? You shouldn't have that mid-2000s Man of Steel-esque costume. He should have like a one that his mom made him.
Fully agree.
Okay. All right. Well, we got 5 episodes to go. Got some work. I think it'll end up being more like 6 episodes to go because I think the finale is 2 episodes. I think it's 2 hours, two 44-minute. I think it's, like 90 minutes or 88 minutes. So, but anyway, basically we have 5 to go. So I don't know. They got to pick it up a little bit here. No more wasting time.
There's something that I remember that's related to something I said earlier.
Okay.
It's about Captain America. Okay, so he's standing against a background of a bunch of like burning bodies. He says, "Let's not get carried away. I've known good vampires, people who never asked for this curse, who don't inflict their pain and hunger on others. But I've never known a good Nazi." And that is kind of like what I was thinking about with the comparison between Trump 1987 and Trump 24, right? Like there's also that famous thing from the Marvel vs. DC where the Joker knocks out Red Skull for being a Nazi. And it's just like, I'm a homicidal maniac, but I'm not a Nazi.
Nazi, yeah.
I feel like that's you can't, to be a good villain, there has to be something epic and mythical, and like, I don't know, you just can't just be a Nazi.
That might be the name of this episode of Superman Lois Pals. You can't just be a Nazi. I do remember that Joker thing. That's one of my favorite, most absurd Joker things.
I'm a psychopath, but I'm an American psychopath.
Yeah. Oh God. All right. Well, let's do it for episode 6.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Sure. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Our theme was composed and performed by Sam Bernstein. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another thrilling adventure of Superman and Lois and Pals.
Tulloch, and you are listening to Superman and Lois and Pals.